Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you all for joining on this occasion. Unfortunately, it's not the happiest of occasions, and we are all gathered here today in grief and mourning over the past couple of weeks, actually, because of what is happening to the Muslims in the Middle East, in Palestine, in Lebanon. I know Sayyid Hussain, you are there currently, and thank you so much for having the strength to do this for us. I know we spoke on Sunday evening, my Sunday evening, and thank you for calling and thank you for your support. And then the loss of Sayyid Asad. It was probably one of the most unique funerals that I have seen, and I'm not even talking about the numbers. Just the way people were crying and consoling each other. Generally in a funeral, you obviously console the family members, you pass your condolences to the family members. Obviously that was happening, but just seeing people consoling and hugging and crying, people that I have not seen in 10 years, friends that I have not seen in 10 years, just hugging and crying and weeping over this loss. And I know he was close to you as well. So just to kind of give you a brief introduction on what is happening right now, we are currently located here in Al Haadi school. A lot of our students knew Sayyid Asad very well. Majority of our students are from the Al Mahdi Center, and obviously, they know him very well. Many of our teachers are part of a group called Moms and Tots, which was founded by Sayyid Asad himself, and he would lead many of the discussions with them. So many of our teachers were close to him as well. And of course, there are many other community members who have joined in today. I believe even from Asadiq and the Mahdi youth have joined in as well. So just for privacy reasons, we have disabled the ability to turn on the cameras because we are in school right now and students are in the classroom. So and because it's a sort of like a public event, we don't want to turn on any cameras because there are children sitting in the classroom, but everyone right now is in their classrooms and they're all watching you on their projectors, and the teachers are with them. So we have about 80 kids in these classes right now that are listening. And of course, there are 100 people on the Zoom call. I'm sure many are listening with their families as well. So without any further ado, thank you once again, Sayyid, and we will let you speak, maybe 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes, whatever is comfortable for you. And inshallah, I will share a link to Slido. If anybody has any questions, we can, maybe add, what's it called, like 5 to 10 minutes for questions. And this is being recorded, but it won't be publicly shared. It is more of a personal eulogy, you could call it. So we will not be publicly sharing it, but if anybody is interested who couldn't make it for whatever reason, we can share the private link to them, inshallah. So Sayyid, I'm gonna just mute myself and maybe even turn off my camera so people can focus on you, inshallah. Jazakallah.
Thank you, Sayyid. Thank you, my friend. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح لنا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا من خزائن علومك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and my sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is a very difficult time for so many of you. And I know a lot of you children in the school, every time I come to Toronto, I come to visit you. I know you guys, I thought of you guys straight away. The teachers, and of course, the greater Toronto community. I know we only have 100 people in here, which goes to show you how many people are trying to join us. I think the maximum is 100, but I think it would have reached a lot more if Zoom had allowed. I wanted to have this talk as soon as I found out what happened, because I knew that there was going to be a humongous void and hole that's not going to be filled for a very long time. When I first found out on Sunday about what happened, just like all of you, I felt deep and utter grief. Sayyid Asad was like a big brother to me, like so many others who feel the same way that I do. And I immediately called Sayyid Ali and we had a talk. And it was a very emotional one. And then he told me straight away that we should have this conversation. What I wanted to speak to you all about today, because this might be the first time some of you experience this kind of loss, especially if you're young. I wanted to speak about how to cope with loss, especially when we look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, and there was so much loss in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. The truth is, my brothers, my sisters, my young brothers, my young sisters, the truth is that there's going to be so much loss in life. I know when you're a child, a lot of the time, one of the biggest fears that you have is, are my parents ever going to leave me? That's one of the scariest things a child can think of, that their parents might one day not be around anymore. And the truth of the matter is, life in this world, to go back to the basics of religion, life in this world is temporary. We go right back to the basics. When we look at what's happening around us right now with the oppression of the children in Gaza, we see that life is temporary. In dunya, it is temporary. We tend to forget that sometimes, even as we become religious. So we come towards religion and then we pray and we fast and we go to the masjid and we do everything we're supposed to do. But the very basics of religion, and one of the main principles of religion, by the way, is to believe in the afterlife. That's one of the main principles of our deen, that if you don't believe in the afterlife, you can't be Muslim. So to be a Muslim, you have to mainly believe in three things. These three things, if you don't believe in them, you're not Muslim. These three things are what make you Muslim. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, that there is no Lord except Allah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, that Rasulullah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So I have to believe God exists and He is one. And I believe that Prophet Muhammad is His messenger. Those are the first two things. If I don't believe these things, I'm not a Muslim. And the third main principle of deen, the main pillar, is there is a world to come. There is an afterlife. We believe in the afterlife in the same way that we believe in the Prophet Muhammad, in the same way that we believe in the existence of Allah. Yet, we don't interact with this belief the same way we interact with Allah, that we pray 5 times a day to Allah, and we constantly read ziyarat al-jami'ah, we say in our salat, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, ya ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we are interacting with God, we are interacting with the Prophet, we're not interacting with barzakh, we're not interacting with Jannah, we're not interacting with akhirah, with the afterlife. And so when we lose someone special to us, when we lose a beloved, we don't know how to handle this religiously, even though religion is supposed to equip us with being able to handle loss and grief. So the first thing I want to begin with is to reaffirm the principles of our religion, that there is an afterlife that is promised to all of us, and that when we die, we don't just die. This might seem very simple to say right now. You might be listening to this and say, well, yeah, that's obvious. It's not that obvious in terms of experience. We're not living it in terms of experience. We need to come back to the basics, the very basics. I'm just saying he's in a better place right now. Come back to the very basics with everything that's happening around us right now, not only in terms of them going to heaven, but also that oppressors will be judged. That if someone is not taken into recompense for their unjust crimes in this world, that's going to happen in the next world. That in the next world, there is a world that is eternal, that goes on forever, where everyone will receive their right, whether they did evil or whether they did good. Now, we lose someone in this world, we start to go through grief and sorrow. And that's what so many of us are experiencing right now. I would say the grief we're experiencing in terms of what's happening in Palestine is different to the grief that we're experiencing in terms of what's happening with Sayyid Asad. Someone might say, how come you're grieving so much for one man whilst you're grieving the same amount or maybe less for thousands of other people that are being killed? There are different forms of grief. One form of grief is intertwined with anger and trauma and disbelief. We are angry at the oppression. We're traumatized by the images that we're seeing. We wish we could help them. But the main difference between this type of grief and the grief we feel for Sayyid Asad is that we didn't have much of a personal connection with the people who are dying in Palestine. We have a personal connection with Sayyid Asad. That's not to say that he's more important. Not whatsoever am I saying that. He would right now tell me, what are you talking about? I'm one person. There are thousands of people. I'm not talking about it in terms of we're mourning for one person over thousands of people. I'm saying the grief is different because I want you to understand grief. That's what we're going to be doing today. I want to understand grief so that we can embrace it and help ourselves to move forward. So the difference is there's a personal connection here. You will go through a different set of emotions when you lose someone with a personal connection to when you witness an injustice and thousands of people dying. You're angry and you're grieving for the people, but you're not emotionally attached to that specific person. You don't know his name. So the grief that you feel is a different type of grief. They are just as worthy of grief, but the grief that that man is feeling, who just lost his 3 kids and they're buried under the rubble, what's the first thing you start to think of? You start to think of yourself in that situation. That's why everyone says, oh, this is different as a parent. Looking at it is different when you have a daughter, when you see a little girl. And I'll say it myself. Every time I saw a little girl crying or bloodied, I would think of my own daughter and I would begin to cry. It would hurt me more. You see, I had to associate it with an emotional connection that I have to my daughter because I don't know that little girl. Yes, I feel hurt for the little girl. It's injustice. But when do I start feeling emotionally connected to her? Is when I place my daughter's face onto her face. So there's an emotional connection between her and I now, and I start to grieve. So grief, a lot of the time, the grief that we're speaking about, especially with Sayyid Asad and losing someone close to us, this type of grief is different to the grief in terms of war, in terms of war with people that we don't have an emotional connection with. When you have an emotional connection to someone, that type of grief is not like traumatic grief. We're going to have to go through a lot of help, to be honest, with the images that we've seen recently. What we've seen recently, we can never be the same again. I don't think things are going to be the same again. I'm not going to be the same again after what I've seen in Palestine in the last few weeks. But that's more traumatic. I don't necessarily miss a child in Palestine because I didn't know them. But I miss Sayyid Asad because I knew him. So this is the type of grief that I'm going to be speaking about, the grief where there's an emotional attachment. And we look at the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and we see when he was 6 years old, he lost his mother right in front of him. She died on the path back to Mecca. He was 6 years old. At 8 years old, he lost his grandfather. He had raised him after his mother for 2 years, Abdul Muttalib. And then he lived with Abu Talib. And Abu Talib passed away when the Prophet was an adult at that time. But when the Prophet Muhammad was 50 years old, he was walking by a place outside of Mecca with his companions, and then he stops. And then they say, Ya Rasulullah, why did you stop? And he begins to cry. And they say, why are you crying? And he kneels down and puts his hand on the ground and he says, this is where my mother passed away. Now, that happened around 44 years after the moment that she died. So he's going through a memory right now. He went through a memory and he sat down and he took that in and he missed his mother. So he's still going through grief because of an emotional attachment to Sayyidah Amina alayhi salam. And then his companions began to cry as well. This shows us that we're not supposed to get to a level where we're not crying anymore. That's not what we mean by getting over grief and moving on. Quite the contrary. If you lose someone that you love, you can mourn them until your final day. And this is not something that is looked down upon. It's about how that mourning is channeled and how it affects your life, because you don't want it to paralyze you. We understand grief in our experience. It feels like there's a weight on our chest, on our hearts, on our shoulders. Sometimes you sit down and then you get a flashback or a memory and you just close your eyes, or you breathe in a shallow way, or it happens every few days perhaps. But grief is understood for all of us as pain. We go through pain and sorrow. There is pain in grief. The Prophet felt pain. The Prophet lost his son. He felt pain. He said that heart goes through pain and the eye tears up, but I will not say anything except that which pleases my Lord. So he says, Alhamdulillah. Even at loss, the Muslim who believes in the afterlife, the Muslim who feels Allah's presence, he says, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. For every state that we are in, we say, Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah. Now, is grief just pain? Is what we're going through just pain, and we're going to go through pain a lot of our lives? Or is there a different understanding to grief that can allow me to understand what it means to move forward? So if I'm saying that we're not going to stop mourning someone, then what is it that I'm actually saying? How do I mourn someone in a healthy way? How do I move forward whilst not feeling like I betrayed my beloved, the one that I lost? Well, first of all, it comes through understanding what grief actually is. And grief is something that's been proven, scientifically proven, to be associated with craving and desire. Craving and desire and pursuit. The same areas in your brain that are activated during times of craving and desire and pursuing something, wanting something, going after something, are the same areas that are activated when you are in a state of grief, along with pain. So your brain is now, the areas that activate in your brain are associated with pain, but also associated with desire, with craving. As in, you want something. When you're grieving, you want something. You want to go to something so badly. You feel that you are anticipating something. The problem is, you're waiting for something and your brain is waiting for something to happen, but it's impossible for it to happen. It's impossible for you to reach out to that thing that you want, because it's not there anymore. So your body starts to enter into an anxious mode, fight or flight mode, because it's heightened now and anticipating. The dopamine is heightened. The body thinks that it's about to go towards what it needs and what it wants. Imagine you're so hungry and there is food right in front of you, but you just can't reach it. And you're so hungry and it's right there, but you're not able to take it and put it in your mouth. That feeling is very similar to grief, because you will never be able to take it. You're going to stay hungry and you're going to feel pain because you're not able to satisfy your craving. There's actually a scientific paper that's written on this. It's called Craving Love, Enduring Grief Activates Brain Reward Center. For those of you who want to check this out, it's written by a lady called Mary Frances O'Connor. So yes, pain is something that we feel in grief, but also in terms of desire and reaching out for something. So there's a reason why I'm saying all of this, because I want you to understand that our relationship with a beloved that we lose is based on three different points. So far, I've only spoken about the emotional aspect, the emotional point, that we feel emotionally close to this person. So I have an emotional connection to Sayyid Asad. We spoke often, we worked together, we have memories together. So I have an emotional connection to him. Or for example, I have an emotional connection with my wife. My wife and I, we share an emotional connection, we feel close to each other. But there are two other aspects to my relationship with my wife. there are two other aspects to your relationship with everyone else. And the aspect is where they are and when you'll see them. Okay? So in terms of time and in terms of space, this is how we interact with all of our relationships. We know that we're going to see this person in a year, next week, today, or maybe we live together. And we know that they're at home, they're in Canada, they're in the UK, they're in Lebanon. Your relationship is always intertwined with these points. So it's not only your emotional connection. Your emotional connection is intertwined with where they are and when you will see them again. So with my wife, for example, I know that she is at home usually, and I know that if I want to see her again, I'll see her tonight. But right now, she just went back to the US because of the war that's happening over here. I stayed behind. So last week, I took her to the airport. Our emotional connection is the same. We're very close. She's my wife. I'm my husband. However, we knew that now you're not going to be next to me anymore. You're going to be in America. So if I want to see you again, it's going to take me a whole day to get to you. So now my brain is reformatting how I'm interacting with her because it knows you're not going to see her every day anymore. Now to see her, you have to travel across the world and it's going to take you a whole day. So in terms of time and in terms of place, she's going to be far away and I'm probably going to see her in 2 months. So my brain now starts to anticipate, okay, I'm going to see her in 2 months' time. Now it feels sad. I feel sad. So at airports, we cry when we say goodbye to someone that we love. Why do we start to cry? Because we're not going to see them for a long time. But we set a certain time where we're going to see them again. Depending on how close you are and the type of relationship that it is, you go through different emotions. So the last time that I spoke to Sayyid Asad, for example, was in Shahr Ramadan. And we, not in Shahr Ramadan, we spoke after Shahr Ramadan. But the last time I saw him was in Shahr Ramadan. And I said goodbye in Toronto. And the idea was I would see him either in a few months or next Muharram. Okay, so I know that it's going to be 6 months to 12 months that I'm going to see him again, and that he's in Canada. And I'm emotionally connected to him. Those are my 3 points. But when someone passes away, you become confused. Why? Because now you don't know exactly where to put them. Your brain is not adjusting. Your brain doesn't adjust when someone dies. Just like this, it still is anticipating when you're going to see them again and where they are. The emotional connection is still there. When someone dies, you don't just lose the emotional connection to them. You still feel just as close, but you don't know where they are anymore. They're not in Canada, they're not in the UK. Their body is here, but they're not moving. So they're not here. And when will I see them again? Well, I won't. When will we talk again? Well, we won't. And that's why you start to go through denial and confusion, because you sit down, you don't know exactly how to handle this. Like I've realized this last few days, I keep wanting to text Sayyid Asad. And I know that it doesn't make sense because you don't want to reply to me. But I keep opening his WhatsApp messages, listening to his voice notes, looking at his picture. I want to type something. It sounds silly, but it's a normal process of grief because my brain isn't yet ready to fully understand him not being there right now. And that there isn't going to be another time in this world that I'm going to see him. And that's why we begin to always pray that we see them in our dreams. We want to, because this relationship now is naked. It's only based on your emotional attachment to them. Now, if someone is not able to understand this, they're going to always be anticipating seeing their beloved again, the one that they lost. And it's not going to happen. So they're constantly in a state of need and desire without being fulfilled. And they end up in total pain for the rest of their lives. What we want to do, we want to remap the relationship. That's what I want you guys to do. That's what I invite you to do. To remap the relationship. That our relationship isn't going to be based on where we see them and when we're going to see them. Okay, we have to understand that this world, the time is over, and that might take some time, because what you will do, you will waste your time. You start to go through what ifs. You say, oh, what if this? What if I did this differently? What if I did that different? For example, me and Sayyid Asad, he would talk to me about his health, actually. I have my, subhanAllah, I was listening to all the voice notes. You see, what you start to do, you start to go through memories. You start to go through memories and you start to feel pain. And then you think of, what could I have done more to help him? And some of you guys know I'm very into health and fitness. And he had reached out to me last year for us to get his health on track. And he was doing well. And he said his health was really good. He had no health problems. And I was sending him like black seed oil, and I was sending him sea moss, and I was sending him these different herbal remedies and telling him, take it like this, take it like that. And he was really enjoying getting his health back on track. So I was listening to those and I started to think, what if I sent him this? And what if I told him this? And what if I had given him a training plan? And what? I'm just putting myself through torture, because the human being starts to go towards guilt. They start to feel guilty for no reason. It does nothing, by the way. And it's not even correct to do so. You've done nothing wrong. Nothing's your fault. But you start to travel towards the emotion of guilt. That's not going to help you either to deal with your grief. What you need to do is you have to consciously sit down with yourself, not avoid, don't busy yourself when you're ready. Okay, it's not going to happen immediately. But constantly, instead of constantly trying to avoid your emotions, you have to sit with yourself and begin to tackle this new map that you have. Okay, I'm anticipating seeing my beloved again. And I'm anticipating where they are. And I'm still very emotionally connected to them. And I need to understand that I'm not going to see them in this world again, in terms of physical space, in terms of time. So what do? This is where you come back to La ilaha illallah and Tawheed. Let me pose an idea to all of you. And I speak about this idea often. Everyone in this world will leave you. Everyone leaves. I look at my mother's eyes now and I see the wrinkles in her eyes, and I know she's not going to be around forever. Either I'm going to die or she's going to die. But I know that once upon a time, I see my mother every day. She was one of the main characters in my life. I would see her all the time. And now I don't, because I grew up and I moved out of my house and I moved to another country. I have different characters now, different main characters. My mother and father were main characters at one point during my childhood. So are my siblings. But now I see them 2 weeks a year. I had best friends that I would see when I was younger. Now I see them a couple of weeks a year, if I see them at all. Now, some of the main characters in my life involve my teacher, involve my wife, involve my daughter. Those are main characters in my life. But one daughter is going to grow up. She's going to get married, inshallah. She will move. I won't see her often. My wife, same thing will happen. One day, she will leave me, or I will leave her, because one of us will die. One of us is going to die first. And I would sometimes speak to my wife about this. I tell her, every single person in my life has left. That's normal. That's how life is. And it's sad, but it's normal. And one day you're going to leave me, or I'm going to leave you. It's the way life is. This is promised. And no one knows when it's coming. And we always say, I'll become closer to Allah when I get older. And death doesn't wait for you to get older. Death comes at any time, at any moment. So then, who is it that remains with me and stays with me and never leaves me? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only Allah. Allah is the only one who is with you in your cradle, and He is the only one who stays with you until you die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never changes, and He never leaves you. Why? Because your relationship with Allah is not based on the 3 points. It's only based on your connection to Him. There is no time and place with Allah. Do you see the difference between your emotional connections to human beings and to Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, huwa ma'akum aynama kuntum. He is with you wherever you are. Allah is present. He's closer to you than your jugular vein. يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ. He is encompassing in between you and your heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all present. My emotional connection to God is one that can never let me down because he never leaves. He doesn't go somewhere that I'm going to take a certain while to see. I can't place him somewhere. And I can't say, when will I see him? He is always, he is before the before and after the after. So when I start to interact with Allah in this way where I'm living with him, I realized, okay, this is a relationship that never leaves me ever. When someone dies, that's where they go. And that's where you have to remap and you have to associate your beloved in barzakh, going to the next world in barzakh, that when they die, by the way, when they die, they're still there. Their soul goes to the next world. So it's just like when you go somewhere, you park your car. A lot of you came to school today, your parents parked the car and then you went into school, right? The car is like the body. You park the car, you put the body in the grave. Then you get out, you go to school, the soul goes to the real world. So Sayyid Asad is still alive. His soul is still alive now in the next world, a higher world than us. His soul. And sometimes that soul can visit us in our dreams. It's granted that gift sometimes. So the person that dies goes to this world. That's the real world. You don't just die and nothing happens. How do I deal with that? How do I understand the person somewhere else well? Begin with your relationship with Allah. So I'm not going to bring you something new. I'm not telling you now, listen, you have to think of them in barzakh. That's going to be hard for you. What I'm going to say is, you see your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's outside time and space. That's the realest relationship you'll ever have because it's an emotional connection without time and space. So you can't lose it. We have an emotional connection plus time and space to people. So when we lose it, we don't know how to handle the time and space aspect. What I'm saying is, when we lose someone, you reconfigure it and you weave it into your relationship with Allah. So you say, Ya Allah, I know you're taking care of Sayyid Asad now. So when I speak to Allah, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on Sayyid Asad, perhaps send him a message. This way, I have a new relationship with Sayyid Asad. I have a new relationship with losing a beloved. I can place them somewhere. Where? With God. Where is God? Everywhere. So this is what they call remapping. We're remapping it. And this is how we're supposed to handle grief. It's a process. It doesn't happen quickly. But look at how Rasulullah handled it in what is known as the year of sorrow, Am al-Huzn, when the Prophet loses his beloved wife Khadija and he loses his uncle Abu Talib. And this is around the 10th year after the prophethood. And I think it's the 8th year after the prophethood. So the Prophet was about 48 years old here. And here, instead of continuing in Mecca, he goes to Medina. In Mecca, he goes to Ta'if and he starts to tell the people of Ta'if to come towards Islam, but they only respond to him with rocks and they don't want him in the town. And the Prophet is in a very deep sorrow and grief, losing his beloveds, and the people are antagonizing towards him. And he goes and sits under a tree and he recites a dua. It's a beautiful dua. It's the same dua that Imam Hussain uses in Dua Arafah. He says, Ilahi, and this is what I'll end on this note. He says, Ilahi, ila man takiluni. Lord, who do you entrust me to? He's speaking to Allah and he says, who are you going to give me to? I'm here, I have nothing, I have no one. Who will I go to? إِلَى قَرِيبٍ فَيَقْطَعُنِي. Are you going to send me to someone who will one day leave me, like my beloveds? أَمْ إِلَى بَعِيدٍ يَتَهَجَّمُنِي. Or will you send me to someone who is antagonizing towards me and will hurt me, like these people, like they're a fire against me? أَمْ إِلَى بَعِيدٍ فَيَتَهَجَّمُنِي. So ultimately he says, Lord, if you are not upset with me, فَلَا أُبَالِي, then I'm okay. As long as you're okay with me, I'm okay. فَإِلَى غَيْرِكَ لَا تَكِلْنِي. He says, Lord, don't give me to anyone except you. Leave me only with you. Don't hand me over to anyone. I have no power on my own. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بك. I have no power except through you. Keep me with you. And as Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he says, Allahumma جعلني أخشاك كأني أراك. Lord, allow me to feel humble in front of you as if I can see you. Let me feel you around me. I want to be with you. This is your only salvation. As Muslims, we need to interact with the third pillar of our religion the same way we interact with the first and second. And this is what will help us understand grief. When we start to look beyond time and space in the way that we love. So this is what it means to love through Allah. That I feel pain. I feel pain when I don't see my beloved one. But I know that the link between us, when it's God, then that connection cannot be broken. May Allah have mercy on all the dead children of Gaza. May Allah bring the oppressed to salvation. May Allah bring His wrath on the oppressor. May Allah have mercy on our beloved Sayyid Asad Jafri. May Allah bring patience to the heart of his wife. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring patience to the heart of his children. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reunite us with our beloved in the next world. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi tayyibin at-tahirin.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنت. Sayyid, thank you so much for that profound talk, and the way you explained it and the way you categorized it. I was getting messages from our staff saying, the way you have explained and differentiated between trauma-induced grief and attachment-induced grief and how to sort of cope with it. Ahsan, Jazakallah so much. It has definitely soothed my heart, to be very blunt. We do have some questions. Now, some of the questions, I believe you kind of answered them already during your talk. So I will just try to quote the questions that are a little bit different. So this one, there's two questions that are kind of saying the same thing. How do we continue the legacy of Sayyid? What is the most effective way to accomplish his vision? And then the second question is kind of related. He always educated us on how to implement an Islamic lens on all of our problems as individuals or society. How do we do this without him? So, obviously someone's feeling that they were the one leading many of these initiatives. How do we do it without him? How do we continue his legacy?
Sayyid, thank you. So one thing I want to share with you guys is last year I was sitting with Sayyid, and I was personally going through a difficult time in the communities in the West, and I was feeling like I wasn't getting anywhere with a lot of the communities. And I've had a lot of these conversations with you, Sayyid, and how we can try to evolve the type of ways in which we engage with our communities. And I was speaking to Sayyid Asad about this last year in Toronto, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I was speaking to Sayyid Asad about it and telling him, you know what, maybe hijrah is the way to go. As in, we all pack up our bags and we move to an Islamic country. And he was completely against that. And he's told me that I was being too much of a pessimist. And he said, and this really hit me, and it changed the way that I saw things. He didn't even say anything genius, but it was with his heart. And that's something that you all understand. I have to tell you. He said to me, Sayyid, there is so much hope over here in these communities. There are so many beautiful, young brothers and sisters with so much potential in what they're going to give the world from their love and from their knowledge and from their deen. There is so much hope. He was so hopeful. And I was looking at him like, this is the first time I heard Alim speaking in that way, where he wasn't being pessimistic at all. He was so optimistic. And that's what was so contagious about wanting to be around him. He gave you so much hope. Like you notice in the comments on Instagram, I noticed something. A lot of the people that were commenting would be sisters that would be crying and saying, or I got a lot of DMs from these sisters that were sending me messages crying and saying, I lost my guide. I lost the person who gave me hope. And all these girls, something common between them was they weren't wearing hijab. And I think that points towards something. The way that Sayyid was, he was inviting to everyone. He would not close the door on someone. He would invite you however you looked like, and whatever stage that you're in, you felt comfortable with him. So I think this is the type of aura or presence that we need to continue in our communities. That each and every single one of us, in our own way, you don't have to be a alim, but I want you, we say that in Arabic, I'm trying to find the English equivalent, but I can't find it. We say ruh, it means soul, right? But we also say his ruh, there's a ruh about him, like an aura. That's why I said aura. Soul really means ruh, but when I'm using ruh right now, I'm saying the ruh of Sayyid Asad, as in we say ruh al-Quran, there's a type of aura to it. The ruh of Sayyid Asad is one in which it was inviting and welcoming. You don't have to be a alim for that. There was so much hope. Last Ramadan, my wife and I, we were with Sayyid Asad and his wife. And again, the same thing. He gave us so much hope about what we can do in the future. I think this is the legacy that we should push forward to live on, which is not very, it's not very common, unfortunately, in the communities around us. The legacy of welcoming, the legacy of hope, the legacy of building something anew and looking towards potential. So for every teacher right now, when you see that potential in that little boy or little girl, and you start to hone their potential and you invest into them, you're carrying on the legacy of Sayyid Asad, especially he's the one who started the Mums and Tods initiative. That shows you he was constantly looking towards the future, constantly looking towards raising the young. That's the real essence of our community, our young. That's who we care about. That's who we want to preserve. That's who we want to cherish. That's who we want to push. So that legacy full of hope and full of a welcoming presence.
Thank you. So there's someone who is sort of struggling with coping mechanisms. I know you that's what your talk was about, but this person specifically asking that with respects to God-centered coping mechanisms, I'm dealing with my own grief by choosing to keep my brain overstimulated with other things. They're trying to occupy their mind with other things to kind of get their attention off of the loss. So they're asking for specific maybe coping mechanisms. I know you did say it's a process. It's not a overnight thing. So maybe comment on that.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say, look, you're a human being, and a human being is not one dimension. He doesn't have just one dimension. You have to approach this holistically. Okay. So what I would say is begin with the easy steps of taking care of your health. That's the first thing I would say for anyone. Begin with that because it's easy to do. You drink a lot more water. You take a walk under the sun. You try to reset your circadian rhythm. Don't stay up at night. See, if you are staying up into the middle of the night, you're not getting much sun, you're not drinking, you're not eating, you're going to feel awful no matter what happens. So try to get the basics done first. I know it's going to feel like, why am I going to be taking care of my health at a time when I'm grieving? But these are the easiest things to do at this stage, where you try to go into a little bit of self-care. So circadian rhythm, very important. To sleep in the nighttime. Don't stay up until Fajr. Don't stay up till 3, 4 a.m. That's when you get all the thoughts and ideas in your brain. And so sleep, hydrate, eat properly, take a walk, move your body. That's the first layer, okay? That's the first thing you do. The second thing you do is see people. So you see your friends and you talk about how you feel. If you need to cry with them, cry with them. So you see people. You sit down, you surround yourself. It's not a good time to be alone right now. Don't spend too much time alone. Thirdly, engage in communal religious tradition or religious rituals. So go to the mosque, Salat al-Jama'ah, Dua Kumail, Majlis, cry. All these things will help you. These are all part of the process, okay? These are all part of the process. I'm saying all of it together because we're trying to approach it holistically. As for the specific tool of how to cope, a coping mechanism, the reason why I say that till the end is because using the tool on its own without any of these isn't going to help you very much. Because if I'm trying to apply a coping mechanism, I'm not sleeping, it's not going to do much for you. So make sure your health is proper. Make sure you're seeing people. Make sure you're engaging in communal religious rituals like salat, dua, kumail, things like that as a group. Don't spend too much time alone. And then finally, when you're alone, here is where there's the coping mechanism. And it's the opposite of what you're doing. The coping mechanism has to be intentional. And when you are busying yourself and you're occupying yourself with something else so that you're not upset, you are now distracting yourself. So you're only pushing it away. The problem is still going to be there when you come back. So after you finish your Netflix series, after you do whatever it is that you're doing to distract yourself, when you go back to the problem is still there. What you need to do is be intentional. And what I said about remapping, as in the time and place that they're in, to bring them towards where you usually interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now you start to move your relationship with him as a normal human being into the place where you have a relationship with God. You're bringing him into this zone, this sphere. In order to do that, you have to dedicate actual time to sit down between you and yourself. So you dedicate real time, half an hour. You sit down, a paper and a pen, let's say, and you write down how you feel. You sit down, you think, not memories. You remap. You sit down, you pray, for example. You dedicate time, not salat. Sit down, face the qibla, and talk to God. Talk to God and allow him to help you to remap, to bring him into the sphere of the divine. So that now your relationship status changes with your lost beloved. Okay? But this coping mechanism can only work when everything else is also working together. It's holistic.
Thank you. We'll ask one final question. This is a bit, I guess, a bit of a theological question as well, but we'll end it with this one, inshallah. How do we implement the idea that we should await death eagerly, but also be grateful for life at the same time? I think by eagerly, they meant like death can come at any time. How do we take the idea that death can come at any time to us, but at the same time be grateful for the life that we have?
I mean, well, I would say the first thing is that they're not contradictory. To know that death is coming at any time is evidence that this life is temporary. And when you have something temporarily, you tend to cherish it a lot more. So actually, this is supposed to help you. The more you understand that life is temporary and the more you understand that death can come at any moment, this is a push towards gratitude for what I have at the moment, right now. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. Well, right now, I know what I have because I know I'm going to lose it one day at any time. Because of that, let me cherish each day as if it's my last. These cliche lines that people say, they're true, they're real. Now, the idea is, do I really believe death can come to me? Do I really believe it? That's the problem. It's the most certain thing in life, and each person lives as if they don't really believe it. That I'm not going to die one day. If you really believed you're going to die tomorrow, what would you do differently? If you really believe this was your last year on earth, would you do all the things that you're doing right now? Probably not. So that belief hasn't really sunk in yet. There's levels to belief. The closer someone is to the belief that they can die at any time, the more present they are. They're present in every day. The more present they are, the more gratitude they feel, the more they cherish their moments. When you have a person that you love that's sick and you know that they're going to die soon, you're going to try to be around them as much as you can because you want to cherish the moments you have left. So if we interact with death in this way and we start to cherish our lives, it's the opposite of the presumption and the question. It's that we actually begin to be more grateful and live with a gratitude mindset.
Thank you, Jazakumullah khaira, Sayyid Hussain, for this really wonderful and really impactful and powerful talk. I think we will try to wrap it up with the Surah Al-Fatiha for Sayyid Asad, and of course all of those who have recently passed away in Palestine, in Lebanon, and all of the marhumin of all of those who are present and watching. Inshallah, we will recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Once again, thank you so much. I do want to tell everyone as well that I'm so proud of Sayyid Hussain myself, as an older brother. I'm not too older than you, but I am older than you, and I think the strength that you have shown. If people don't know, he is in Lebanon right now, and to be very frank, it's an active war zone by every definition. So thank you so much. It shows your strength and your ability to kind of, I mean, you are a living example of how to cope with all of these things. And I think you're demonstrating it for us. And if I was in your position, I probably would not even be
Oh,
thinking
you
about
do way more. I love you, Sayyidi. Everyone knows how
it.
much I love you. I love you, Habibi.
So,
Thank you.
may Allah keep you safe, you and your family safe, and make Allah keep all of the Muslimin, the Mu'mineen in that region, particularly right now. May Allah keep all of you safe. And we are here for you as well, Sayyid. Whenever you need anything from us, we are here at your service as well. Thank you
God
once
bless you.
again. I just want to make two announcements for the viewers. There is a majlis tonight at the JCC for Isal Sawab of Sayyid Asad. That is starting at 6:30 at JCC, and the poster is also available online. And then on Friday, there is a Isal Sawab Majlis at the Al Mahdi Center, and both of these speeches will be by Maulana Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi. So if anyone, inshallah, all of you can make it, that will be great. Thank you once again, Sayyid. Inshallah, we'll stay in touch, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, everyone. Assalam.